Mike Greer and Friday afternoon news dumps remain undefeated as the Sharks trade Danil Gushchin for Oskar Olausson.
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast covering your favorite team in the Bay Area. My name is JD Young, caretaker at the Reef, also the co-host of Locked On NHL. I want to thank you for making the Locked On Sharks your first listen, proudly part of the Locked On Network. We cover your team every day or 3 times a week or more right now if Mike Greer continues to do Friday news dumps. If you want to be an everydayer, all you have to do is just follow wherever you get podcasts, or you can watch on YouTube as well. And we're going to be doing a nice kind of 15 to 20 minutes as the San Jose Sharks have traded prospect Danil Gushchin to the Colorado Avalanche for Oskar Olausson. So we're going to get into the why of it first and kind of what this means for the Sharks, why they made this move. And then we'll get to know Oskar Olausson a little bit more. So before we get to all that, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Okay, take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. So, Mike Greer, Friday new Askarov trade Friday afternoon, and yes, this isn't as big as that, but Mike Greer signings on Friday afternoons. Mike, can we enjoy the weekend, buddy? This could have waited until Monday. Anyway, but. So the San Jose Sharks trade for Danil Gushchin to the Colorado Avalanche for forward Oskar Olausson. Gushchin's departure kind of marks the end of the 2020 draft class, the much heralded, myself very much included in that, and kind of thinking that 2020 draft class was going to be the first kind of start of a new era in San Jose Sharks hockey. Spoiler, we were all wrong, as now everybody, Timothy Spitzerov is still technically the Sharks own his rights until August 15th. He's not getting signed. Spitzerov has not done anything to warrant getting signed by the San Jose Sharks. So the 2020 draft class will officially be done with players that the Sharks drafted. Of course, we still have Askarov and Mukhamadullin, both products of that 2020 draft class, but from players who were actually selected in the 2020 draft class by Doug Wilson and Doug Wilson Jr., this including, and then the Thomas Borlow trade recently as well, kind of ends this 2020 draft class. So why did the Sharks make this move? Pretty clear. You had to get Ryan Reaves number 75 ready for him, right? We saw the Sharks do this with Chernyshov, getting rid of him, so that way they could bring Macklin Celebrini. And of course, Ryan Reaves wears number 75. Had to clear that out so that way he can wear 75 without any issues. That was a joke. The big thing I think for why the Sharks actually did this is because Gushchin clearly was no longer part of the Sharks' plans and the organization, and clearly showed what they thought about him, right? Made the team last year from training camp, was on the Sharks, and wasn't able to really kind of establish himself as a full-time NHLer in that time. Gushchin, who performed very well last year in the AHL, right? 30 goal scorers. He was a huge part of the success of the San Jose Barracuda. But you constantly saw other players get called up, and Gushchin continued to toil down in the AHL and just never got that opportunity, right? And with a guy like Danil Gushchin, who's 5'8", if you're not scoring in the NHL, what else can you do for me? And the question really was, the answer to that was not much, right? He's not going to play on the power play. He's not going to play on the penalty kill. He's not going to not really a third liner type of player, definitely not a fourth line type of player, right? Needed to play with other skilled players. And the Sharks felt like, we have if we're going to give top 6 minutes to a young player. We want to be Will Smith and Celebrini and Eklund and some of these other guys who we feel like are going to be longer term pieces to our future, right? And for Gushchin, a guy who, going to be getting ready to enter his third contract now, as after ZLC signed a 1-year deal last year with the Sharks, and then is now a player who's, you're starting to kind of get to that AHL veteran status with him, as he's, just like you're kind of a guy who's right. Like as crazy as it sounds, he's played, a bajillion games in the AHL right now, 150 games in the AHL. And he's going to be an AHL veteran. And the Sharks / Barracuda, you have to, that's unfortunate rules of the AHL where, you can only have X amount of veterans and X amount of guys who've played so many games and such. And just for a guy like Danil Gushchin, it kind of felt like easily was the odd man out, especially after the moves that the San Jose Sharks have made this season, right? Bringing in a guy like Jeff Skinner. We know Michael Misa is going to be competing for a roster spot as well. Gaudet and Chernyshov, both two guys who are going to be, middle six forwards as well. And then you think about the Barracuda, right? You have Chernyshov, you have Musty, you have Kasper Holtonen, most likely Cam Lund, 4 guys right there who are all players much higher draft pedigree, and players who you're kind of invested in. Mike Grier has personally invested in these guys to be big parts of your Sharks and lineup. So, unfortunately, it just kind of felt like the time was over for Danil Gushchin. And, I a couple weeks ago, I said I would be surprised if Gushchin's even on the roster by training camp. And here we are, right? And as the Sharks have clearly felt like he just wasn't a long-term fit for them, unfortunately. So, it's kind of sad because Gushchin was, a player who I really, really liked and thought that he could be a potential, kind of middle six or second line forward for the Sharks. A guy who we've seen be able to score very, in the AHL at a very good rate, but just never quite clicked for him in the NHL. And again, right, when you're 5'8" and if you're not scoring, what else can you do for me? And unfortunately, it feels like for the Sharks, this is definitely a trade of let's swap our kind of problem childs and see, or maybe our guys who, in Gushchin's case, a guy who's, doesn't really have a future here. In Oskar Olausson's case, a guy who just never has kind of lived up to his potential. And let's see if we can kind of swap him and see what happens here. So I do fully expect, I still think it's hard it's probably a much harder path for Gushchin to crack into the NHL on a much better Avalanche team. But, I fully expect Gushchin to have a really nice season over in Colorado, and that Eagles team is probably still going to be very good, and he's probably going to still score a bajillion goals over there. And wouldn't be surprised if he gets some revenge on the Barracuda at some point this season. So, as for Oskar Olausson, right, a guy who's on the last year of his entry-level contract, still he's a guy where you can, just kind of provides the Barracuda a little bit more flexibility, not waivers exempt anymore, which is a bit interesting, but still a player for the Barracuda who will be able to provide them just a little bit of flexibility, especially when it comes to kind of their AHL veteranship and such. So we're going to break down Olausson and what the Sharks are getting from him here in just 1 minute. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can be. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. And the great thing about it is if you're sharing finances with someone, maybe you have your personal accounts and you guys have a shared account where you're working towards big time goals, whether it's buying a house, buying a car, or just planning your next vacation. Monarch Money makes it easy to stay on the same page as you can track both your personal goals and your shared goals together. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. All right, before we continue, do of course want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. For your second listen, and go check out the Locked On NHL podcast. Myself, I'm on that every Tuesday. There's no off season. We're bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter the most with local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts. So, what are the Sharks getting in Oskar Olausson? So Olausson, former first-round pick of the 2021 draft, 28th overall, was picked by the Colorado Avalanche. Coming over from Sweden, played for HV71 team over there. He played about 16 games in the SHL in his draft year, where he scored. He had 3 goals and an assist for 4 points. Also played in the Hockey Allsvenskan that season as well. Played on the J20 team, kind of bounced around as well. Also played on the World Junior team. If I recall that year, that was also the same season as Eklund, and if I recall, that World Juniors got shut down. But anyway, 21-22 season, transferred over to the OHL, where he played with the Barrie Colts. So he's actually knows Ethan Cardwell. They played together. He also played with the Oshawa Generals that season. In 55 games, had 49 points, including a very solid production of 26 goals in that time. Then he's been kind of basically playing in the AHL since. He's got a handful of NHL games, about 4 in that time, but mostly has been an AHL guy for in the Colorado organization. And again, right, Colorado's pretty stacked with their forward group, and I know they've dealt with some injuries over the past couple seasons, but like that is a very tough group to crack, right? So Olausson this year, maybe not the most productive season for him. 61 games, he had 11 goals, 15 assists with 105 shots on goal. He also popped 3 assists for the Eagles in the playoffs this year as well, in 7 playoff games for them. I think he had, if I recall correctly, I think he's scored some points against the Barracuda series as well. So a guy who, has definitely seen his stock fallen over the past couple seasons. Advanced hockey stats from Jay Fresh. He basically right now, his chance to be an full-time NHLer, that's a 200 games with a positive WAR, is at 3%. His chance to become a star, that's a top 18.5% WAR per 82 games. 0%. Like this guy is basically at that like fringe AHL, NHL type of level player going forward. Looking at hockey prospecting, Byron Bader's model, you see the same thing of a guy who's just really, when in his draft year, he was a 53% chance player to make the NHL with a 24% chance to be a star, and has just kind of seen those numbers fall off the cliff over the last couple seasons. Looking back at his elite prospects draft profile, they graded him very well. They had him the 14th ranked player in that draft, right? And you look at that draft, right, with guys like Eklund and Brent Clark and, all the other players in that draft. They graded him very well in his skating at 6.5, 5.5 shooting, 5.5 passing. These are all out of 1 to 9 scale, 6.5 puck handling, 5.5 hockey sense, and a 6 physical with an A grade. Like he is a guy who's had legitimate talent. And even going back to, looking at kind of his profile from Elite Prospects, the name of the game for Oskar Olausson is pure skill. He leveraged it across 3 different levels of competition in Sweden last year and did some serious offensive damage too. Olausson's work in the SHL was particularly impressive. He only collected 4 points in his 16 games with the HV71 men's team, but the number is so much more impressive than it seems when it's placed in the appropriate context. It's the 8th most points by a U19 skater in the SHL. It's tied for the 5th most points per game rate in that same group. Basically, you talk about with Olausson is his blistering speed. HV71 product is one of the best drafts, most mechanically refined skaters, owing to perfect posture and great depth with each stride. He's an absolute menace with the puck in space. It's not just a skating ability; it's a form from David St. Louis. So like the skating for Olausson has been a massive, is one of his calling cards, right? Just how good of a skater he is. They talk about Olausson rarely attempted the same neutral zone rush twice in the same game. He'll cross the dotted line, change lanes, speeds, work well-timed weight shifts as a puck carrier to get past the defender opposite him. It isn't to say Olausson is without his warts as a puck carrier. Is distinctly positive quality of his game. Could use some little polishing. The way he kind of carries the puck leaves it open for exposures and stuff. But every one of Olausson's tools projects to be comfortable, above average NHL player. It sets an unusually high floor for a player at this point in the draft. Olausson has the potential to take those individual skills and build them into a top 6 scoring winger at the NHL level. At the very least, he's comfortably projects to be a team's middle 6 player. Okay, so for the Sharks, right, you're taking a swing on a player who does have like legitimate skill, right? This isn't like Bordelot for Shane Bowers, or I'm not trying to knock Shane Bowers, but like Olausson, like there was a reason why he was projected to be a top, a first round pick and to be like why he was thought of so positively. And you're again kind of resetting the clock a little bit here is, he has 1 more year on his ELC, and you have like you're just starting the RFA game with him where you can kind of control his rights. And we know the middle 6 of the Sharks, like it feels like there's going to be opportunities for guys to win jobs here. And I don't expect Olausson to win an NHL job outright but maybe you get him in here, right? We've seen some of the work that the Sharks development staff has done over the past couple seasons with some of their prospects. You have a 6'2", 180-pound frame. We know Mike Greer likes those big boys. Maybe needs to add a little bit more weight or whatever, but like you're kind of just resetting that clock and taking a swing on a guy who does have legitimate skill. Does it work? Maybe, maybe not. But at the very least, though, I think you're adding another piece for the Barracuda, and you're kind of clearing the deck for some of these younger players like Musty and Chernyshov and Haltonen, and Kamlun and whomever else to kind of be able to step into a bigger role without having to kind of clog it down right there. And, if Olausson maybe is playing on your top line with a guy like Musty or a guy like Lund or a guy like, whomever, right? It's right now, kind of provides another quote unquote veteran type of player, as Olausson has played, a ton of AHL games at this point, right? He's played he's played 163 AHL games. So he actually has played just as much as Danil Gushchin. But you're trying to kind of clear the deck for some of your younger players here. And I think Olausson provides you a little bit more flexibility compared to a guy like Danil Gushchin, right? Where if Gushchin's not scoring, what else can he do for you? And I think Olausson maybe a little bit more well-rounded with his game. I'm not saying Olausson is as good as Danil Gushchin, right? And the production easily shows, right? As Gushchin has been a top scorer, for the Barracuda. I think he leaves the Barracuda as their all-time top scorer. I think Curtis Pashelka tweeted that out later. But again, right, you're trying to set your younger players up to be able to come in and have a big impact right away. So that's going to be it for me today. Again, I think long-term though, Olausson probably gets a handful of NHL games here at some point this year due to injuries or whatever, and maybe he goes on a hot streak with the Barracuda. But this is, let's call it what it is. It's an AHL trade. It's a 1-for-1 AHL trade, and maybe Olausson can kind of refine his spark with the Barracuda here. So, but yeah, that's going to be it for me today. We'll be back on Sunday night, Monday, as we'll probably be talking Will Smith. So make sure you're following along wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. Follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Locked On Sharks. Follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at My Fry Hole. Until Sunday night, Monday. Bye, friends.